You're listening to Goldstein on Gelt.
No matter how much planning or praying you do, at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision about handling your money. Best-selling author Dave Ramsey is great at offering practical advice, and we've got some of Dave's guidance right now, right here on the Goldstein on Gelt show.
This is Dave Ramsey, and this is your Daily Money Makeover. I would never recommend anyone buy a piece of property on a land contract, but it's also a bad deal for the seller, especially with today's interest rates. I'll explain after this. If you have collectors calling you multiple times a day, cursing or threatening you in any way, you need to visit collectionbully.com. These guys will connect you with an attorney who can stop collection agencies from threatening you anymore. That's collectionbully.com. Dave, would you sell a home on a land contract if that house is paid for? No, I would not. I just don't own or finance stuff. There's no point. Interest rates are so low, you can make more on your money selling the house, putting the cash in your hand from the sale of the house and investing it somewhere else. You'll make more than 3 or 4 or 5% on it. And I just wouldn't tie up my money at that kind of a rate. And I would never recommend someone buy a home on a land contract because the deed is not in their name. And if the current owners, something in their life gets screwed up, then your deal gets screwed up. So I think land contracts are a really bad idea for the buyer. I've seen those things go wrong a bunch of times. But as a seller, you've got total control there, but you're just tying up your money at a very low rate. If you're going to do that, just rent it and keep it. If you got to collect payments, put a renter in it and keep it. What's the difference except that you get the upside as the house goes up in value if you continue to own it?
Want to hear more from Dave Ramsey? Log on to daveramsey.com/show.
Learn about global investments with local wisdom on the Goldstein on Gelt show.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to bring back to the Goldstein on Gelt show Professor Dan Shechtman. Last time we spoke when he won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his work in quasicrystals. And today, Dan, I'm very happy to have you to discuss what is motivating you to run to be the president of Israel.
Yes, that's a very good question. It didn't come from me. People started to talk to me and say, hey, Danny, why don't you run for the president? You are just the right person for the job. And I said, no. And then the pressure grew. And then a good friend of mine from high school called and said, Danny, you should do that for the sake of Israel, for the people of Israel. And I will be with you. I will be working with you. I'll help you all the way through. And I said, okay, you know what? Let's do it. And this is how it happened. And then we contacted Ayala Hassan from Arutz Achat, which is the first channel in Israel. It's a public channel. Ayala Hassan is a distinguished television figure in Israel. And we gave her the details. She came and interviewed me, and this was the announcement.
Okay, so going from the world of science to the world of politics is in fact a big step. Isn't it more normal, would you say, to have a politician or maybe even an ex-military man as the president?
I don't think so. I think that the president of Israel should be a uniting figure. First of all, somebody who will look to unite the people of Israel. And a politician, by definition, is inclined. He's a member of a party, mm-hmm. and therefore he represents the people that voted for that party. And that's not a good idea, in my opinion. Many people contact us now via the electronic media and say we want a non-political president. And I think that they're right. We need somebody who is not inclined and not a member of one party. That's about it. Ex-military man? Why do you want a military man to represent Israel in the world? Are we a military dictatorship? No, I don't think so. We are a civilian society, and yes, we have a military to protect us. But I don't think that a military man should represent us as president. No, I think that we need a civilian, a non-political figure, and I'm one.
Okay. Not only are you a civilian and a non-political figure, but you do have a Nobel Prize-winning background in science. If and when you become president, how do you see yourself using your background to help promote Israeli business and technology in particular?
Right. So I can tell you that over the past 2 years or so, since the Nobel Prize, I have been traveling extensively around the world, and on the average, I give 100 talks every year. That's a lot.
Wow.
And it's around the world, running, flying from country to country. And I meet large audience in large auditoria. I meet decision makers around the world. I meet presidents around the world. And I portray a different Israel. I am telling them, forget about what you hear in the media. That's not Israel. Look at me. Israel is culture. Israel is a democracy. Israel is science. Israel is a technological entrepreneurial country. We are leading in that. Israel is a wonderful health system for everybody. Look at the people of Israel. They came from impoverished countries. They came from countries with almost no medical care to talk about, and they live longer now in Israel than people live in the rest of the world. So we are doing something good, and Israel is a thriving democracy. And so this is it. I represent Israel, the democratic, the enlightened, the scientific country. Now, as for your question, as you may know, I have been teaching at the Technion a class named Technological Entrepreneurship, and I have been doing that for 27 years now. I am one of the forefathers of technological entrepreneurship in Israel. When I started teaching entrepreneurship, nobody talked about it. And by now, and I teach it at the Technion, which is the university that I'm a member of. And over these years, Israel became a startup nation. I have something to do with it. And I know high tech. I know how it works. And I think that I can proudly represent the high tech people of Israel around the world, and therefore represent what they make. And what they make is amazing.
And it's certainly something that you have been doing for a long time. We're speaking with Professor Dan Shechtman from the Technion, Nobel Prize winner in chemistry in 2011, and now he's running to be president of Israel. Danny, let's go into a little bit more of the political side that the president has to deal with. For example, one of the issues that a lot of people say is that Israel is not so good at hasbara, at telling the story of Israel. Not only that, we're facing some very, very strong opposition, not the least of which is what they call BDS, boycott, divest, sanctions. How do you see yourself dealing with that?
Right. Well, of all the candidates, I think I can do the best job, definitely can do the best job, because I've been doing it. It's not that I'm dreaming about it. I have been doing it for the last 2 years. As I said, I travel around the world, far and wide. And I talk to people, I talk to students, I talk to decision makers, I talk to teachers, I talk in universities. And I can tell you that not once did I meet the boycott that you read about in the media. Not once.
Why do you think that is? Why do you suspect that is?
Maybe it's not as widespread as it is portrayed in the media. Maybe it is a very rare and scattered occasion. We just heard the Prime Minister of England yesterday. I was in the Weizmann Institute, and he was not there, but he sent a clip, and he said that we are against boycott. His representative at the meeting was very vehemently against boycott, and he said the government of England will not allow that. And England is one of the places that you hear about that they have boycott. Mm-hmm. Personally, I have never met anything like this. It's apparently rare. And apparently it's the media that makes it a big event, but apparently it's not.
That's interesting. That explains why maybe the story gets a lot of traction in the news, but it does not really seem to be affecting major scientists like yourself. How about how you would deal with other of the internal problems that Israel has? currently we're dealing with the issue of the draft for everyone. And this is something that is really dividing the country. It seems to me the job of the president is to bring people together, but boy, are people really digging in on each side. How do you think you could speak to everyone to bring people together?
Okay. This is exactly what I am. I can speak to everybody because I do not represent one fraction of the society. I'm not a member of any party, and I look only for the uniting factors in the Israeli society, and there are many of these. There are many things, there are many issues in which the government has a key role. The government has a great job in promoting its agenda and dealing with the difficulties. I don't have to talk about any difficulty that the government deals with. I do not have to talk about the draft that you were talking about. I do not have to talk about political negotiations with the Palestinians. The government, we have a good government. They deal with it, and they do their best for the best of the country. The president of the country doesn't have to talk about everything.
Mm-hmm. So, if you become president, what other goals do you have in mind to help bring the country into the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Right. Well, there are several things that we need to do. Number one is education. We need to improve our education system. We need to not only to teach, but also to make young people a mensch, a good human being. Mm-hmm. And this is what is called in Hebrew chinuch, which is different from haskala. It's making a good human being, and we should have a good program to do that, starting maybe in the kindergarten and ending at the age of 18. And, as you know, there is a free education in Israel from the age 3 to the age of 18. So we need to do that. This is number one, and I talk about it now with the Minister of Education. We negotiate it, and hopefully I will be able, from that position of presidency, I will be able to move better in a direction. This is number one. Number two, we have a problem of young people, young educated people that cannot find jobs in Israel after they went for their postdocs or other such missions in the world. They want to come back, and they do not have a position here because the number of positions in universities is limited. So the country should not neglect these people. This is the greatest treasure that we have, the Israeli mind. We should bring them back, and we should build facility to host them back. And I have a plan to promote a building of 2 large civilian research centers, one in the north in the Galilee and one in the south in the Negev. And the one in the north will deal with biotechnology because there's a lot of expertise in the north in biotechnology. And it will be based on a branch of one university, maybe the Technion, because the Technion is in the north, that will build a faculty of biotechnology right there. And around it, a large, well-invested government laboratory, and around that, incubators, and around that, industries. And this will provide jobs not only for the minds that will return, but to thousands upon thousands of people who live in that area. In the south, we have expertise in growing food in the desert. We are very good at it. We know how to deal with water. Drip irrigation is just one system. We develop new types of vegetables that can not only grow in the south, but can benefit from the heat there. We are expert in that, and we can market that expertise to the world. Again, a branch of university, maybe Ben Gurion University, who is in the Negev and has expertise in that. Around it, a good, large civilian research center, and around that, incubators and industries. This will also bring multitude of people, multitude of brains from around the world to find a job in Israel and to come back. This is a treasure. The minds of the people is a treasure. We cannot allow them to stay abroad if they want to come back. we should lure them to come back. We should offer them good position. This is as important as a defense system because this is our future.
I think that is a very important way to look at it, and it really is a problem that Israel has been suffering from. And I certainly wish you the best of luck in building that and in all of the goals that you have as the next president of Israel. We've been talking with Dan Shechtman. Danny, in the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people keep track of you and your campaign?
Say it again, please. Ask again.
How can people keep track of what you're doing and your campaign?
Oh, yes. Well, if they go to the internet, then they will find how to track me. There are several ways to do that, and it's easy to find. Just put my name, and you will find many ways to track what we have. And we put on the internet daily news about my program.
Okay, we will put a link to that at the show notes of goldsteinongelt.com to make it easy for people to find. Professor Dan Shechtman, good luck, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Doug.
The theme of today's show, apart from having a Nobel Prize winner who may be the next president of Israel as one of our top guests, but the theme of the show has really been about focus. And I mentioned in the first half of the show that you can see focus as if you break up the letters, F-O-C-U-S, it means follow one course until success. And an example that I gave earlier was how someone might want to focus on a part of his portfolio, let's say buying bonds, but he doesn't want to focus on the stock side of the portfolio because for whatever reason it's not his expert, or he doesn't have one of the 3 T's that are necessary to handling the portfolio. What are the 3 T's? They're mentioned in my book, Rich as a King, that I wrote with Susan Polgar, but I'll just tell you anyway. The 3 T's are time, temperament, and talent. Time is simply you need to be able to invest the time to watch over a portfolio, and the more risky the portfolio, the more time you have to invest in it. You need to have the temperament, which means you can't get sucked in by the emotions, specifically when the market goes down and you lose a lot of money. If you are the guy who's selling out at the bottom because you're so emotionally upset about what happened, then maybe trading stocks isn't for you. So that's time, temperament, and talent. Of course, you do have to know a little bit about what you're doing, which is why I always like to direct people to one of the books that I've written. But I think that we had suggested, or we spoke about using a money manager if you want to have someone else focus on the stock side of your portfolio and you wanted to focus on the bonds. But there are a lot of other areas that you can improve your financial situation if that's what you choose to focus on. So let me just wrap up with a story about a client that I had who felt that investments weren't really for them, didn't like dealing with it very much, frankly wasn't that interested. And even when I would begin speaking to them about the investments, I got a feeling they might have been a little bit bored. Not that I was boring, but whatever, wasn't their topic. But one area that they were interested in and were able to focus on was budgeting. They were able to keep track of their income and their outflow, and simply by keeping track of it, what they had discovered, and what a lot of people discover, is that they were able to contain their spending, drop it by about 20%. Now that's huge. If you can cut your spending by about 20% and not suffer, right? Everyone is able to cut his spending, but a lot of times if you do that, you'll really feel the pinch and you'll be very unhappy. That's why a lot of people think budgeting is a bad word. But if you focus on budgeting and you do it the right way, you'll find not a big deal. And the first thing to do if you think you're spending too much money, and a good indication that you're spending too much money is if you have credit card debt or if you have overdraft in the bank. If that's the case, then you should definitely be focusing on this. And by the way, you should probably focus on this way before you focus on investing, because fixing up your spending is going to improve your financial situation much more than whether you buy this fund or that fund. Focus on that. And there are a lot of tools that are available. In fact, I'm just beginning to test a new tool for day-to-day budgeting. I'm not going to tell you about it right now because I want to finish the test, but I'd be very interested if you have ideas or if you've been using a certain computer program or if you have an Excel spreadsheet that you've developed. Let me know. Maybe we can talk about that on the air. Maybe we can bring you on the air if you consider yourself an expert in the field. We'll talk about how you've used software or how you have used technology in order to really improve your financial situation. And of course, you could swing the other way. You don't need to use a lot of high-tech stuff in order to become good at handling your money. Probably one of the simplest systems, and one that I recommend a lot, is that when people are having a little trouble keeping within their budget, is switch to cash. Obviously, there are some things that these days you can't do with cash, but a lot of things you can do, and we recommend the envelope system, which Dave Ramsey talks about a lot on his show. Dave Ramsey is also a regular guest on the Goldstein on Gelt show with his daily money makeover. But I've written about it, I've spoken about it. The envelope system simply says that at the beginning of the month, work out what your budget is going to be for the month, and however much money you're going to allot towards food or towards clothing or towards the type of things that you pay with cash, stick in an envelope, and when you go shopping, actually bring that envelope with you and use that money. And when you're done with that money, you're done for the month. I can guarantee you that within a couple of months of doing this, you'll get much, much better at controlling the pace that you use your money and becoming more realistic about it. And the fact is, when people pay for things on credit cards, they tend to not feel the money as much. There was a great study that was done at McDonald's. They said that people who bought a meal there and paid on their credit card paid on average about $7 per meal, and people who used cash paid about $4 per meal. So it's almost double. Why? We can go over the psychology some other time, but the fact of the matter is people who are using cash are able to control their spending a little bit better. It's a great way to focus, to follow one course until success, F-O-C-U-S, follow one course until success. It's a great way to focus on your money and to make sure that you are using it properly. And if that's the area you want to focus on, great. Just make sure that you have a good financial advisor who can help you to plan and take care of the rest of it. All right, we are now just about out of time. I'd like to take a minute to thank my producer, Yoram Ohana, my chief engineer, Naomi Grossman, my associate engineer, J.P. Pasqua, and of course, thank you, because without having listeners to the Goldstein on Gelt show, there would be no reason for us to be here. Join us next week. I'll be bringing on a couple of fabulous guests, and as always, we'll be talking about some very, very important ideas so that you can handle your money in a responsible and hopefully very profitable manner. I'm Doug Goldstein, your host. See you next week on the Goldstein on Gelt show.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with international investment expert Doug Goldstein. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, go to www.goldsteinongelt.com or write to Doug directly at doug@profile-financial.com.